listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you live and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. If you'd like to send us an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com on all social media networks, X-Zone Radio TV. And you can listen to the X-Zone 724, 365, as well as the show Monday through Friday from 8 p.m. until midnight at www.xzoneradiotv.com. My guest this hour is a gentleman that I've had the pleasure of meeting in person. I've also had the pleasure of having him on our show and other shows where I've been asked to sit in and bring credible people to the microphones of other radio talk show hosts. My guest this hour is Charles James Hull, and he was born and raised in rural Wisconsin. Near Madison, Charles enlisted in the United States Air Force in July of 1964. He was stationed at Nellis Air Force Base outside of Las Vegas, Nevada, for over 2 years. While there, he served for extensive periods of time as a weather observer in the desert of the gunnery ranges at Indian Springs, Nevada. Now, following this, he served a year in Vietnam in the Mekong Delta. Charles received an award for surviving more than 35 communist attacks. A year after receiving an honorable discharge in May of 1968, Charles married his wife and good friend Marie on the condition that he would go to college. In record time, he earned both a bachelor's degree in thermal physics and a master's degree in applied nuclear physics at San Diego State University in San Diego, California. Charles did PhD-level postgraduate work at the University of Maine at Bangor. Later, he earned a master's in business administration from Nova Southwestern University at Fort Lauderdale in Florida. Now, I have set the stage telling you, the members of the X-Zone Nation, that Charles Hull is a very credible, hardworking, dedicated man. His wife, Marie, is his best friend. She is his she is his rock, so to speak, just like my wife is mine. Marie is going to be joining me now to tell you what we're going to be talking about this hour here in the X-Zone. So without further ado, Marie, welcome to the show. Great talking to you again. And
well, thank you, Rob. Charles is a bit of a character, and so I always say I'm his character reference. Charles is a pretty smart man. He got a perfect score on the graduate record exam in math, but I don't send him shopping for a dozen eggs because he would come back with 11 and 2 of those would be cracked. So maybe that gives you an idea of what kind of animal he is. Charles was very smart in that he waited until we'd been married a couple months to tell me about the extraterrestrials coming into his barracks at night when he was in the service. And he said, "What do you think?" And I said, well, I never thought about whether extraterrestrials exist or not, and I really don't care. I just hope that if I ever met one, I would behave in a manner that was a credit to the human race. And thinking about that, well, 10 years ago or so, when I found he'd been working on his memoirs for over 18 years and hadn't told me about it, that was what helped me come up with the title Millennial Hospitality, because we are going to have to be better humans when we have to deal with these people on a daily basis. So let me tell you a little bit about the time I discovered he'd been writing his memoirs.
All right, why don't we do this, Marie? I've got to take a short commercial break. When we come back, really. They pay the bills. So when we come back, more of this fascinating story. Charles James Hall is my special guest, as well as his beautiful wife, Marie. We'll be back here in the X Zone on the other side of the short break. Don't go away.
You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
Welcome back, everyone. The story you are going to hear over the next 40 some odd minutes is true. We're not talking about some person making weird claims. We're not talking about a couple of guys in the back of a truck, having some good old jack. We're talking about a very credible man. A man that I believe, a man that I have met, a man that I have interviewed over the years. And his name is Charles Hall. His wife, Marie, is with us as well. And Marie, if you could please continue the story.
10 years, when Charles was 58, he'd come to the end of a contract. And, if you're 58, you might have a lot of good interviews, but sometimes they end up hiring the person who's 48 or 38. And this unemployment period actually lasted 18 months. And I really think it was a gift from God, because a month into this period of unemployment, I walked into the computer room and Charles shut the screen really fast. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm working on a book." And I said, "I haven't been able to get you to write 3 sentences to your mother. I have to see this." So he printed out 2 chapters of his memoirs. This was on an old dot matrix print machine. And I went into the other room and I read for about 20 minutes, and I came back and I said, "We have to publish this." And he said, "Oh, no, I was just writing my memoirs for our grandchildren. And, even if you don't say anything bad about somebody, they can sue you." And I said, "So just use the author's standard technique of putting a disclaimer in the front of the book and disguising the names of places and people and pretending it's fiction." And he said, well, he really wasn't interested. He said, "The Air Force never told me I couldn't talk about these things, but on the other hand, they haven't been forthcoming during the last 40 plus years." And I said, "Well, disguise the place names too." Well, he still was not at all interested in doing this. And finally, I was so exasperated. I said, "Honey, If the men in black come to the front door, you should go with them. It's free room and board. And he started laughing and he said, "You're right. What do we have to lose?" Well, a lot of these files that he'd written over the previous 18 years were on a dead but not yet given a Christian burial, a Tandy 2000 that was out in the garage. So it was a lot of work to coax these files up. And then I had to do a lot of editing. Mm-hmm. I took out all the profanity because I wanted sixth graders to be able to read it. Mm-hmm. And I took out the vernacular, that he worked with fellows from the Bronx and mm-hmm. blacks from the South, and he was trying to imitate the way they talked. And I said, "Honey, I think these books the book, I really didn't know there would be more than one book. I said, this book should be read by people all over the world for whom English might be a second language. So I want it to be in good English." Anyway, when I showed it to my friend, who actually is an author, she said, "Oh, he should write more. This is good stuff, although it isn't really my cup of tea." And I said, "Well, he can't, because he had to swear to me that everything was true." I said, "I don't have anything against science fiction or fantasy, but I was going to have to pay some of my modest inheritance to get it published." And when I told Charles, he said, "Oh, well, I have more files on my computer and I have more stories that I haven't written down." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Well, yes, I was with them for over 2 years." But anyway, that was then, and I would say that our popularity has grown steadily. I note Edgar Mitchell said that we're going to have to make friends with these people the way we make friends with the neighbor next door. And I think that's the message in Millennial Hospitality Series. Charles doesn't try to prove the existence of aliens because, let's face it, you couldn't write a book proving the existence of God unless you had an audience that was open to the concept.
I hate to say it, but that book's already been written.
Yeah, but he just walks you through what it was like for him as a young man, really fresh off the farm. And anyway, we've had some amazing things happen to us over the years. I'll just mention one short story and then we'll put Charles on, because I know this isn't a real long interview. A few years back, a gentleman who had worked for NASA for a number of years and was very successful said that he always believed everything in Charles' books because mm-hmm. when he was at NASA, they asked him if he would like to transfer into the real space program, and for that he'd have to move to Las Vegas. And his wife and daughter didn't want to leave their extended family. So he left NASA, started a business on his own, and still has a top secret clearance. And anyway, he wanted to have us come and have dinner with his family and friends, which we agreed to. It took a couple months to set it up. And when we got there, he was so excited because he had been on many bases, but he had never been to Indian Springs, which, by the way, is now Creech since 2005, July, I believe. But he was there for a ribbon-cutting ceremony at the end of some work that he had done. And he said there were no lower ranking military. It was all, generals or high-ranking officers. And he was standing next to a general that he actually knew quite well, a friend of his. And he said, "I was just wondering if I could drive up the road, just a mile or two. I won't get out of the car, and just look at the scenery." And the general said, "Bad idea. You probably wouldn't come back alive." And then just that quickly, he said, "I'm so glad you could make it for this event," like don't repeat what I just said. Anyway, he said the atmosphere there was a very strange, much more secure than so many other places that he'd been. And he said he thought Charles had really underplayed the strangeness and the security of the place that he served in. But anyway, unless you have some questions for me, I think I'll just turn this over to Charles.
All right. Yeah, that would be great. And once again, Marie, great talking to you. And
well, thanks.
Thanks.
I wanted to keep it short because I know you will have a lot of and ask Charles any questions you want. If he doesn't know the answer, he'll say so. And if it's something he can't talk about, like what he's currently doing, he'll just say, I can't talk about that.
I understand, and I appreciate and respect that.
Let's put him on.
All right.
Let's see. Okay.
Sit in this chair.
Okay.
By the way, Exonation, if you'd like more information about Charles Hull and Marie, their website is millennialhospitality.com. And Charles, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
So how are you doing, Charles? Long time no talk.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be on your show,
Well,
and I really appreciate you having me on your show. I hope that the microphone is picking it up correctly.
Yeah, everything is fine over here, Charles. Charles, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about what we're going to be talking about on the other side of the news?
Yes, I have personally stood in front of 3 different types of extraterrestrials. The ones I call the tall whites at Indian Springs, the ones I call the grays, which are in the secure areas further north, and the ones I call the Norwegians with 24 teeth. And I have a theory that I have copyrighted. My belief is that Einstein was wrong about relativity, that time does not slow down when you accelerate towards the speed of light. Dimensions do not get shorter, and what happens is as you travel faster, turbulence develops in various other force fields. There's more force fields than what Einstein knew about.
Wow. Now, you are known and highly respected for the information that you've brought to the world about the Talls in Area 52. What I'd like to do, Charles, is after the news break, talk to you about Area 52 and your own personal experiences, if you can.
Yes.
All right, Charles, thank you so much. We're going to be taking our news break now. And Exonation, don't forget, if you'd like to watch past issues of the Exxon TV show, we have all 12 episodes from last year. My gosh, it's been a year already. At www.xzonetv.com. That's www.xzonetv.com. Charles Hull and I will be back on the other side of this news break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. If you'd like to send an email to us, it's very simple. All you have to do is send your emails to xzone at xzoneradiotv.com. And you can listen to the X Zone 724 365 at www.xzoneradiotv.com. The X Zone is a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And we're coming to you right here from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Charles Hull is my guest. We'll both be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away. You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. And welcome back, everyone. Charles Hull is my special guest at this hour. His website is www.millennialhospitality.com. And I love what it says beneath his website, dedicated to the greater honor and the glory of God, who created all, extraterrestrials included. Charles, thanks very much for joining us. So if you could tell our listeners your story about what happened and what you saw in Area 52.
Yes. In 1965, when you were Indian Springs Auxiliary Field was the most desolate field you could imagine. And when you looked up the valley from Indian Springs to those mountains that are like 42 miles up there, the upper half of that valley was inside the perimeter of Area 51. And if you looked straight to the north and to the east, then you were looking at where the main hangar was, the alien hangar. That was Area 54. And if you looked straight up the valley to the west, that was Area 53. That was their underground living area. And if you went up that valley, as I did on a number of occasions, you would find that to the east at Dogbone Valley, the deep spacecraft would land and take off on schedule, the way airplanes do at an airport. And if you went straight up that valley and you went to the right, you would go up the mountains to the hangar, which I have been. On the other hand, if you went up that valley to the left, to Area 53, you would go northwest to Area 52, to the S4 facility, and the road would continue on to Area 51. I was a weather observer, and my clearance allowed me to go anywhere I wanted, day or night, no questions asked. And when you went up the road towards Area 51, when you went straight up the valley and to the left, just before the S4 facility, there was an intersection where the road continued straight towards Area Groom Lake and Area 50, Groom Lake in the distance. And if you turned left, then it would go down to a dry lake bed that is Area 52. And of course, my clearance said I could do anything I wanted, but I had to be alone. I could never take anyone with me, and I never did. If I had taken anyone with me, I wouldn't have been in any trouble, but the person with me might not have come back alive. And during the time, my 5 books describe some of the events that happened in those 2 years. There are some events that are not in the books, and because I was trying to capture how it felt to live those days, day by day. And I wasn't trying to give an overview. I was not trying to write a documentary. I was not trying to write an expose. I was trying to answer the question, come with me and count the hours as I lived the longest day. And, how did it feel to be up there coming down in Area 52 and realizing that the caves were above the highest water line and therefore had to have been built during the last ice age, that the Greys had to have been here since the last ice age. Yeah.
Now, people are probably saying, Area 52, isn't it Area 51?
Area 51 is just the cover area. Inside Area 51 in 1965, there were other areas that went up to Area 60. And then the areas were grouped into lands. So, for example, Area 53 and Area 54 and the northern half of Indian Springs Valley was dreamland. At Area 51 per se, there was just Groom Lake. And Area 52 was Papoose Lake. Papoose Lake was so ungodly secret that when I was writing my sorry.
Are you okay?
It's so ungodly secret that I had to be real careful about what I talked about there.
What did you see? Like, what you saw, did it shake your very belief in the world around you?
The tall whites, the grays, and the Norwegians come in family groups, men, women, and children. And the first thing it convinced me of is that there's a God and God is love. The biggest shock I ever had was realizing that Einstein was wrong about relativity.
Right.
The tall whites and the grays and the Norwegians never came to teach me anything. I had to learn it all by just watching them and reasoning through it myself. And so one night I was certain in 1965 that in late 1965, originally it took me at least 6 months to get over the terror of being out there alone around them, even though they were friendly. And I in my books I also describe times when I felt I could communicate with my guardian angels. And I'm Roman Catholic, and one of the points I'm trying to make in the book is the difference between talking to an extraterrestrial and talking to your guardian angel. There was absolutely no fear in talking to my guardian angels. They're pure love. On the other hand, the extraterrestrials, it takes you a while to get over your fear, because they come armed and they're different than us. But that's another point I was trying to make in my book.
Is it possible, Charles, that the extraterrestrials of today were the guardian angels of yesteryear?
No, because once, as in that, for example, in book 1, when I describe bringing those 2 airliners in the storm, where my guardian angels came and showed me how the path would. The guardian angels are pure love, and there's no fear whatever with them. And on the other hand, the extraterrestrials, when you first come across them, are really terrifying. Now, it's possible that people in the Old Testament might have seen the tall whites and misconfused them because they might not have understood what it's like to talk to your guardian angel.
Right.
Once you understand what it's like to communicate with your guardian angel, you'd never confuse them.
I understand that there were different species that came to Area 52. Would you say that Area 52 was like a galactic bus terminal?
No. Area 52 is run by the Greys, and 90% of the UFOs that you see are something to do with the gray aliens. And the gray aliens are very arrogant and very protective. And see, if there were any extraterrestrials that were considered to be a threat to the gray alien children, the gray generals would simply shoot them off. No muss, no fuss. There is no intergalactic council. There's the grays, there's the whites, and there's the Norwegians with 24 teeth.
Why do you think, Charles, with everything that you've seen and the people that I've talked to over the years, the people that you've spoken to over the years, and the people that you've met, why do you think the government still has this truth embargo in place?
Because there are so many humans that cannot handle the truth. Most of my fans are beautiful people who want to talk with me. But every now and then you come across 1 or 2 fans that really cannot handle the truth and really don't know how to reason their way through. In my books, one of the things I'm trying very hard to do is I was in some very difficult times, many times back in the 60s, and with God's help, we had to reason our way through it. And many people can't do that. Many humans can't. And so, it doesn't surprise me that the government is extremely reluctant about saying that they're here. However, as the privatization of space, as NASA goes into space, they'll have to admit that they're here.
But NASA's already been in space. We've been to the moon. We've sent robotic craft to Mars. We've gone past Pluto. So what are the ETs waiting for? Why don't they just land and say, ta-da, we're here?
The ETs would. It's the government that won't. One of the episodes that is not in any of my books was in 1965. In my book, in book 5, I talk about 2 climate studies. Well, really, there were more than 2. I just had to be very careful. In 1965, there was one of the first climate studies, different than the 2 that are described in book 5. And they sent me to those valleys north of Indian Springs, and I mean, and they were doing night missions. And the they had a two-man version of the X-15 that you could live in, and they were circumnavigating the moon.
Wow.
And there was no briefing. They just sent me out there. They told there was a weather station, generator shack, supplies, and so on. But you could only go out. Anyone but me could only go out there for the last 2 weeks of Christmas, of December. And they told me to leave all the lights on, park the truck. It was facing to the southwest, southeast, and to the southeast, and then to take my theodolite, my balloons, 3 or 5 miles out to the east, and release 4 balloons, 1 at 10, 1 at midnight, 1 at 2, and 1 at 4. Now the desert is really tough on weather balloons, and I'd broken a couple, and
Right.
So I had the 10 o'clock run and the midnight run. And as I was doing the midnight run, and I was looking up, it was like 12:30 at night, and it was a beautiful night. The weather was fine. I could see the plane coming back in from the moon. It was doing almost 25,000 miles an hour, and it was heading for the runways either at Groom Lake or the runways over in Utah where they have more areas. And I remember feeling like I was such a failure because I was supposed to have 4 wind measurements. I only had 2, and I only had 2 stripes. And when I got back to the weather shack in the morning, and when I was out in the desert, there were people walking around my weather shack, extraterrestrials. They were the Greys. And in the distance, in the haze and stuff, I was confused as to what they were because they didn't look like humans. It looked like maybe the colonels or something were checking up on me. And then when I went back in the morning and I called Nellis, they said I was supposed to bring my stuff in. And they weren't angry with me. They were just very nice. And so I put my stuff in the truck, and they had said I should take everything I had in my duffel bag. And I went into Nellis, and there was I only had 2 stripes, and there was a sergeant there. He was in charge, or a lieutenant there. He was in charge of my OJT, lieutenant, and I idolized him. He was 6'2". He had a car. He was, and I remember I was trying to explain to him that I was probably going to get an Article 15 or something because the major had wanted to see me. And I remember he was saying, "Oh, I think they like you because when the major came back, you seemed happy." And then when 4 o'clock came, I went out, and the major called me in, and he was just he wasn't angry or anything. He was just very authoritative, the way a major is. And he said, the Pentagon generals really like what you're doing, and they're awarding you a big award. The award is Monday I can take off, It's not an act of Congress. It's not a vote of Congress. It's, instead of reporting for duty on Monday, I can stay overnight the weekend and here at Nellis and just have fun on Monday and then go back on Tuesday. And that was one of the best awards I ever had. It kind of shows what it was like. I was desperate. I thought he was going to give me an Article 15 for missing the last 2 runs, and for him to say, "Well, take the Monday off, use the Air Force truck, and just go enjoy Las Vegas. The Pentagon wants you to," and it's not in my records or anything, but I always counted that as one of the best awards I ever received. And I get to just wander around Monday and use the government truck and have fun. And so that's the kind of stuff I'm trying to capture. That's the kind of stuff I'm trying to capture in my books, is what it was like to be out there. looking at the gray extraterrestrials some 3 or 4 miles away, and then looking up at the airplane, the the double man version of the X-15, way high up, coming back from circumnavigating the moon. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Fascinating, Charles. In a previous interview, you said that at one time you even took the extraterrestrials into Las Vegas.
I didn't take them in. I had a joke about me taking them in.
I see.
The government would take them in. Their guards would take them in. I myself would be in Las Vegas and encounter them.
So if they look like us, if they can pass for somebody in Las Vegas, do we really need to fear them? Do we really need to suppress the information? Do we really need to make so many credible people look like morons?
If credible people would just do unto others, just do the golden rule, you wouldn't need to. Now, there's 3 different kinds. The Norwegians with 24 teeth. If you're not a dentist, you can't tell the difference between them and a human.
Wow.
Tell them about the woman you worked with.
There was a time that I worked with a woman, and the Norwegians with 24 teeth. They have the quality. They look just like humans, but they don't fidget. And I remember sitting in staff meetings, and she would just be sitting there, and all the other women would be fidgeting.
Right.
And one day and I thought maybe it was me, One day she came to me and said that she and about 20 of her playmates had grown up in a city on the East Coast, and their parents, the parents of all the children, had to put them up for adoption when they were about 5.
All right, Charles, we're going to have to take a little break here. A bit of a cliffhanger for you, the X Zone Nation. Charles Hall is my special guest. www.millennialhospitality.com. My name's Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Charles Hall and I will return on the other side of this short break. Don't go away.
You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
Exonation, Charles Hall is our special guest, www.millennialhospitality.com. First of all, Charles, thank you and Marie for coming on the show tonight. Always a great pleasure talking to you. But what would you like to tell the Exo Nation tonight, Charles? Do they have anything to fear from the extraterrestrials, or is the fear and the hype based on Hollywood and the unwillingness of the government to be honest with the people?
Well, you have to treat them in a good neighborly fashion. Mm-hmm. Like if you're in France, you have to treat the French, do unto others.
Sure.
The tall whites, the grays, the Norwegians, they're very proud of their ability to protect themselves, especially the whites and the grays. Mm-hmm. And so, you can't mess with them. You can't, Well, the first agreement I had with them was that if I saw one, I would just stop and sing a little song and let them know I was here. And then they would approach me as close as they felt comfortable. And if they got too close, then I would back away and they would stop. So the first thing we would do is to negotiate a distance that we could talk to each other. Sometimes that distance was kind of far away, like a quarter mile.
Wow.
And, because they had electronic communication and so on. But see, when you deal with them, they don't want to be touched by a human. They don't want a human pursuing them. They don't want a human running up and running on board their scout craft. They want them to be. They want humans to behave as good
So, So what is your final message to the X Zone Nation tonight?
Well, the tall white mothers and the gray mothers and the Norwegian mothers loved their children more than human mothers love their children.
Wow.
The idea that a tall white mother would ever have an abortion or sacrifice her child is just out of the question. Every mother I ever saw and father was proud of their willingness to die for their children, hands down. And so when you're around them, the first thing you have to do is to recognize that like when I'd start the conversation with them, I'd say, I understand you love your children more than human mothers love their children, and
Because that's what they
because
said
that's
to you.
that's what they were proud of. You know, they thought of us as barbarians because of all the things that we were willing to do to our kids that they would never dream of.
So what was their purpose in coming here?
Their purpose is the same as the reason there's an airport on Honolulu on Oahu and on the Hawaiian Islands. It's a place for craft to stop, refurbish, repair. They'll be in port for 2 weeks and then they'll stand out to space again. It's a place to service their deep spacecraft.
Charles, I want to thank you and Marie so much for joining us. Always a great pleasure talking to you. Take care of yourself and have fun in Hawaii, guys.
Thank you for having us.
It's my pleasure. Exonation, Charles Hall and his beautiful wife, Marie, who has super hats, I might add, have been our guest this hour. www.millennialhospitality.com. That's www.millennialhospitality.com. Now, I'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't forget, you can check out the last season of the X Zone TV show at www.xzonetv.com and the X Zone store where you can buy all your X Zone gear, www.thexzonestore.com. Don't go away. I'll be right back.